Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we continue our conversation with Bucks sideline and digital reporter Melanie Ricks. Get some of her thoughts on last season, her first in that role with the team, and more Mel wisdom coming up next here on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis, and we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube as well. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs have wound down. It means the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. Something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We pick up where we left off with Melanie Ricks, her first season as the role of digital and sideline reporter for the Milwaukee Bucks. Some things that stood out to her from last year and some listener questions that you guys had for Mel. It comes your way after this on Locked On Bucks. All right, so Mel, you mentioned how much everything has changed, and it's decades in the making, it seems like, but it just kind of really sped up the last few years. When you think all the way back to the dream team, everybody will point to when you talked about that, bringing the focus on basketball in other countries, saying, hey, we want to do this too. And you would slowly but surely see more international players filter into the NBA. For the longest time, it was a handful of guys that were in the league. Now it's basically 50-50, and that's brought over some changes in play styles and how things are done internationally. It's brought in certainly more skill, and it has just been, I think, the NBA game has changed more in the last 20 years than any other of the major professional sports have.
Yeah. Is it possible for the other sports, and sorry to cut you off, Camille, but do you think it's possible for those other sports to change or evolve the way the NBA has at this point?
Camille would be the resident football expert.
Right.
I think like that. I mean, I think with the NFL, it's a little bit slower, but one of the things that the NBA has been moving to, I think, because of the globalization of the sport, is that parity idea and that concept, which is something like NFL has had for a while now. Like, you see your Patrick Mahomes making runs, you had your Tom Brady's, but for the most part, outside of that, like, you're seeing different teams get to that big game more often. And I think with the NBA now, with such an influx of talent, you are seeing a lot more parity, which is more in line with that football, where it's like, I go into the season and I can tell you who I think are championship contenders, but I can't tell you like I could 10 years ago, like, oh, it's going to be LeBron James and the Cavaliers, or like, it's a different feeling at this point too. And I think also, you mentioned just influence and the guys who have been changing the game, like Steph Curry, what he has done to the game of basketball, it is played so differently now because of his shooting prowess, where it's like, it looks completely different than it did before. Even just the depth of the 3-point shots that are being taken. You have a generation of players now who grew up watching LeBron James play that point forward role, who watched Paul George play, another really popular player amongst a lot of young guys, where I want to be that big guy who can do a little bit of everything. I want to pass. I want to shoot. I want to be able to dunk. I want to be able to do it all. So I think with how the game has been changing so much and so quickly, I'm not sure if other sports can attest to that as well. Like, it feels a lot of times like the NBA moves just quicker. And I think maybe it's because of the style of play, the fast pace of it. But yeah, the NBA definitely has changed a lot over the last couple of years. And so talking about segues, talking about shooting prowess, mentioned Steph Curry, but now the Bucks have Damian Lillard, someone else who in his own right is one of the best shooters the league has seen. We already know, top 75 all time. And you were in your new role during the first year of Damian Lillard in Milwaukee. So first, just the question of what was it like moving into this role as the sideline reporter or digital content reporter for the Bucks?
It was, well, first off, the Bucks made it pretty seamless for me. Justin had mentioned before when we had initially started our conversation about Zora. And so Zora Stevenson, she's now with NBC Sports. We're seeing our girl cover the Olympics. Shout out to Z. I mean, come on now. Come on, Z. Like, she's killing it. She's the GOAT. So Z, she actually was working with NBC Sports for a couple of seasons prior to her leaving the Bucks. And so when she did initially get that opportunity, the Bucks, they contacted me and they asked me if I would want to try out a game. Now, I'll just tell you, but I don't know if you both know this, but that's actually how I got my start with my in-arena hosting. I was a dancer. I was on the dance team, and they knew that I was in school studying broadcast journalism. And one of the in-arena hosts at the time, she got sick. And so they called me the night before the game and they said, do you want to just try this out? And I was like, yeah, why not? So that's how I, got into that role. And then, fast forward to when they called me about the sideline opportunity, that had been because, I had inquired and, I had said, if there are ever any opportunities for, more professional development, I'm definitely interested in X, Y, and Z. And one of the things they said was, is sideline something that you think you'd be interested in? I'm like, absolutely. You just sign me up, check it off the list. Absolutely. It's giving dream job, but I'm cool. It's chill. Everything's fine. If you call me, it's fine, whatever. It really was like a dream come true. I still pinch myself. And even you saying my first season was the same year that Damian Lillard played, like it's not real, it's not real, but yes, it was pretty remarkable. So anyway, to answer your question, they transitioned me very seamlessly because I was able to fill in for Zora prior to becoming the full-time sideline reporter. And that is a very unique situation. So I'm very fortunate. I really am.
I mean, like that story too, I think we had talked about it with, I put it out there of, hey, I'm interested in doing this. It just backs up. You don't get what you don't ask for, right? Like nobody's just going to read your mind and hand it to you. So
yes,
right.
You have to advocate for yourself.
You got to put it out there.
Yes.
So the whole experience, how quickly did it come together where Zora exits and was it on your birthday? It was close to it. It was early August. Yeah.
Yeah, it was around there. They're like, happy birthday. You want to work for us? I was like, yeah, for sure. Thanks. No, but essentially that. So, we had been in talks all summer and really we had been in talks even that season prior. And it's one of those things where you're always kind of having those open conversations. And Zora, God bless her, she didn't know what was going to happen for her, but she manifested that for herself. And she said, listen, I'm going to prepare you because I know that something great is going to happen for me. And that's because Zora, she's the best. She really is. And so she advocated for herself. She was preparing for her next step. And in that, because I saw her doing that, I was like, yep, I know what's going to happen next. And so I knew, but I didn't know. A lot of people, when the posting was made announcing, they called me, they texted me, they're like, oh my gosh, congrats. But like, also like, duh. But I'm like, I didn't know. I hoped, I prayed, but I never want to assume. I'm a big, believer in not counting your eggs before they hatch. But that being said, Justin, going back to what you say, closed mouths don't get fed. You have to advocate. You got to speak up. It's so important. I do believe everything I've gotten in my life, both professionally and personally, has been because I've advocated for myself. I've put it out there in the universe and I've manifested it. I believe that it's going to happen. I think anyone can accomplish anything that they set their minds to. I really do.
See, not you being an inspirational speaker on the podcast
today,
making me feel like I can run through a wall.
Camille, run through that wall, honey. Be careful, but do it. I got you.
You were giving me the energy I need today. But let me ask you this as well with this season. Like, what are some of your takeaways from this current iteration of the Milwaukee Bucks? Like we mentioned, it was the first year with Damian Lillard here on the team without Jrue Holiday, who was beloved here in the city of Milwaukee as well. Coaching switch in the middle of the season. Now Doc Rivers is in place. Like it was a year of a lot of things happening. So when you look back at this season, like what are your current thoughts on this particular iteration of the Milwaukee Bucks?
I love this iteration. I think that I do believe genuinely that everything happens for a reason. Camille, there were so many things that happened this season that were so like out of character, not even just for Bucks basketball, but for the NBA. Yeah. Like I just felt like there were things that came up that you just don't typically see, let alone in a row and, all in one season to one team. Now, I'm not saying that to say like, we're the center of the NBA universe and everything was happening to us. It's not to say that, but it was a lot. And it's so interesting because it did kind of feel like that shift, that paradigm shift, it happened when the Damian Lillard, Jrue Holiday situation, because even that was very like, jarring. Like it was like,
Yeah.
oh, we got Dame, but then it was like, oh, we're losing Drew. Like, you know what I mean? It was such a like juxtaposition, and it was so bittersweet. You know, I mean, you know how we all feel. And so that being said, to me, that set the tone for the season. Like it was like, I don't know what to, like, I'm so excited, but also like, what does this mean? I don't know what this means. And so then obviously with all of the things that happened, genuinely, I feel like it's setting this iteration of the Milwaukee Bucks up for a championship. I genuinely do believe it. I believe that Damian Lillard is destined to win an NBA championship with Giannis, Antetokounmpo, and the Milwaukee Bucks. I do. And I think that everything that has happened, it had to happen that way.
Some more thoughts on last season coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by FanDuel. And look, we all love sports, so much so that we never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have wound down, we're getting fewer games, and the sports just aren't sporting like we want them to. FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. You know, it's funny too, Mel, when you talk about everything that happened along the way with this team last season. I remember, I think Dave and I would joke about it a couple of times of just like, you know, I really wish this team was boring again, where it was just, you knew what to expect. Yeah, like there was nothing you would walk into of what's going to happen today. Like the Bucks were the good team, but they were boring, so we didn't need to pay attention to them. You really started to long for that sometime during the season because, as you mentioned, the whole thing, it just felt like it was a fever dream. When it started with the trade for Damian Lillard, where you're thinking, you know, the whole offseason, we all had the conversations of, yeah, I'd love to have Dame. There's no way the Bucks can get him. And then you actually get him. And then you see everything else that starts to happen and the coaching changes and injuries. And it was just one thing after another that we kind of joked last season. I mean, I'm sure somebody that was on the road experiencing this, you felt the same way. But by the time you got to the All-Star break, you were just like, man, they really, can we double the length of the All-Star break? Because this team really needs that reset right now.
100%. And I felt that way for Doc Rivers. I'm like, this poor guy. I mean, what an inheritance. You know what I mean? They're like, congrats, have fun. And, you know, and God bless Doc Rivers because he, and I say it like that to be silly because he's silly. Like he sees the irony in it. It's like, as he said, I was literally on a golf course. I was retired and like, this is what I come back for. All right, let's go. Like he's into it. And I love that about him. But I also feel, and I'm curious if y'all agree, like, character development, it is so key. I don't like, you know, you think about this year's world champion Noah, Boston Celtics. I'm sorry. But you think about them, this did not happen overnight. We have to remember the journey that this team has gone through. And, you know, they went through quite a journey. There was a lot of character development that had to happen. And I think, you know, because the Celtics have been a force, you know, for quite a few years, people almost forget just how much they had to go through to get to this particular championship. And so I think it's a similar thing. And I don't know. It's just so interesting when people do start to get a little bit like, oh, but what if we did this? Or I wish this could have been. It's like, nah, just chill out, just relax. It's all part of the plan. I'm just popping my popcorn. I'm just waiting for it to happen. And it's going to happen.
Your Doc Rivers point's a good one. It's something that we've mentioned before where we've been like, that's a hard situation to walk into, especially because when he took, you know, control of the team, it was right before that West Coast trip. It was the longest West Coast trip, and it was a lot of tough games on that trip. Chris Middleton gets injured along the way on that trip, and then from there, it's just trying to pick the pieces up together and familiarize himself with the team. And I've been saying, like, I know Doc Rivers gets a lot of crap based on his coaching history and things that have happened before with they blow the 3-1 leads. I don't know why the Bucks would make this decision, but I feel like Doc Rivers is actually the right coach for this team in this particular time frame. Given the personalities in the locker room, a superstar team where you have Giannis and you have Dame, you need a coach that has some cachet behind his name and who can also communicate really, really well. Because one thing you hear about Doc Rivers over and over is his ability to unite a team, to communicate a message, to motivate a team. And that's something I feel like this Bucks team really needed. So yes, a very tough situation for him last year, but I think that helped set him up really good this year because it's like he had an audit year for the team of getting to know guys beforehand. And now we get his full coaching staff can roll into the season. And I'm somebody who is very optimistic about the Milwaukee Bucks this season, assuming they can be healthy when we get to the playoffs, because if they're healthy, I truly do believe in this team. I'm not sure if you're a wrestling fan, like the new thing. I believe in Joe Hendry. I'm not saying that, but I do believe in the Milwaukee Bucks.
I hear you, girl. I hear you. I do. Well, and you know what, too? I think that's another thing. Doc Rivers, like you said, it did almost feel like an audit year. I mean, just the timing in which he came in, the coaching staff, it wasn't his technically. He inherited it just like he did with the team. And not only that, Dame. Let's talk about Dame getting an offseason with Milwaukee. I think that's going to be huge. And you guys talked about it. So, again, another transition, if you will. We got younger. And I think the NBA is young. They're fast. And it's also a generation thing. And sorry, I'm an interviewer, Justin. I had my own radio show. I can't help it. So, Camille, I tend to ask questions, even though I'm supposed to be answering them. Do you feel like Gen Z is changing the game? Because I feel like they are. And not to sound like a millennial, but Gen Z is changing the game right now.
They're changing everything.
Everything.
What generation are you?
I'd like to say I'm a millennial with a Gen Z cusp. Like I have a Gen Z moon about me. You know what I mean? But no, I'm a millennial because I was born in 91. But I have Gen Z tendencies. Yeah.
Okay. I'm in the boomer generation, so I.
You are not a boomer. Get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, all the subtle changes, and the big piece of it too is Adam Silver's a much different commissioner than we had previously, where you can argue as if you're not an NBA fan, you will make the argument of, it's pro players, but it's more of a partnership. And before the commissioner we're here for the owners. And that is a part of the job as the commissioner, but it has been much more of a partnership under Adam Silver. There's changes they've implemented we would have never seen previously. The NBA Cup and the play-in tournament and things like that, building in more off days and time off during the All-Star break. Those, I don't know if that's necessarily Gen Z per se, but those are all the subtle types of changes that we've seen. And I don't think he's done. I think we're going to continue to see those tweaks and changes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then one other point I wanted to make earlier, Justin, you just reminded me, I think social media obviously has been the biggest change. So, Justin, the reason why you reminded me, you had said earlier, you feel in the last 20 years is where we've really seen that evolution, if you will. I think social media is the biggest root of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when I joined Twitter, it was back in I'm gonna age myself here. 09 is when I joined Twitter because I was in a class for communications at Marquette and they were like, you should have a Twitter account. And I was like, for what? And they're like, you need to have one. And I remember being on there in the early days of Twitter and everything like that. And I remember when the Bucks actually followed me on Twitter. And this is like 09, 2010 in that time frame. And I was just like, yeah, here we go. It is solidified, but just seeing how social media teams have changed over the years, because again, I've been an early adopter on Twitter, for example, and watching just what's put out by the team. Before it was just clips every so often, but now you're seeing behind the scenes content. You're seeing
storytelling.
The storytelling aspect of it. And it is so cool to be able to get that a deeper look into the team as well. And I think you play a part in that as well, just how you communicate during games, which you're able to bring the fans into and just kind of give that behind the scenes aspect of it. So with that all being said, with you in the current role that you have, has there been any moments where you're, doing a story or it leads you in a way that's been really unexpected and you're just like, wow, I didn't expect for us to end up here, but it turned out so much better because it did?
Well, okay. I don't know if this is going to exactly answer your question, but as soon as you started to ask that, I thought about the game ball.
Situation. Yes.
What was it?
So when Giannis,
I don't think I heard of this.
Yeah, probably not. Only a few people have talked about it. But that game, first off, even just that whole rivalry, y'all, with the Pacers, what a weird thing. Add that to the list. But anyway, so that when I was waiting for Yanni, and I didn't know what was going. I honestly did not understand what was happening, and he's talking to Tyrese, and I didn't get what was happening. I just see him bolt. I was like, okay, so we have to, we're gonna wait until he comes back, because he's gonna come back, because he has a new scoring record. We're gonna talk about it for sure, no problem. But in my mind, I'm like, do you address that, or do you stay focused on this? And so I chose the route of, I'm going to stay focused on this, because I don't know if people know this. I'm not fed my questions. I'm not given my story angles. Everything that I do, I come up with. Obviously, we have producers, we have directors where, if there are certain things that they want to talk about that game, or, if there's something going on in the community that involves a player, like, of course, that's going to be the thing. But for the most part, I'm the one that's coming up with my questions. And that was actually something that I saw on Twitter, which was, well, why didn't she ask him about running back in the tunnel? Why didn't she ask him what happened back there? But I was like, I don't want to take away from this moment. Yeah. And it felt like a really pivotal moment for me. And not to make that, because I had nothing to do with that, but like, I really had to think on my feet there. I'm like, do I talk about what just happened? Yeah. And I was like, no, because it's not about that. Like, I know it became about that. But in my mind, I'm like, I don't want his moment, because this is a big moment. We don't know if he'll ever score higher than that. Right. I want it to be about this. I don't want that particular legacy to involve that game ball. Although, let's be honest, it probably will for some time, but I don't think it will forever if that's where his record stays. I think it'll eventually be about the record and not about the situation that surrounded it. But yeah, so I don't know. It kind of doesn't answer your question, Camille, but I do remember that being a moment where I was like, oh, this is taking a turn, and where do I go from here?
Yeah, I mean, that's you always have to, you pointed it out a couple times, you always have to stay in the moment. And those are like the fun parts about this job, when you go in and I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And then when something off script happens and it's okay.
Live entertainment.
How do I react to this, or what should we do? Yep. And your point too of, look, I'm not fed questions, because like we hear it too of, oh, why don't you say this? Or you were told to ask that. Like, no, like the team does not feed us talking points. Now, there are times when they will tell us, do not talk about this.
Right. We're told what not to talk about.
Right. But they don't tell us you must talk about this, or you have to bring this up. And yeah, I mean, that's like, that was the thing I think everybody was kind of grappling with is, okay, I'm not quite sure what's happening here, because all we could really see is Giannis is talking to Halliburton. Giannis is talking to Lloyd Pierce. He does not look like he's in the frame of mind we usually see him in.
Right.
I'm not quite sure what happened here, but oh, by the way, he scored 64 points in a game, and he may never have an output that high. Nobody in franchise history might ever have an output that high. So we do kind of have to make this the story.
And I would love, and it's totally fine if you disagree with the direction I went. I'm curious, what would you have done in that moment? Because I have wondered that, and obviously we're past it.
It's tough, because what did you know other than he ran off?
Right.
And
we didn't know the whole story yet.
Yeah, like we didn't have enough background or talking points. Yeah. Yeah, you just knew, okay, I saw him dart off in the tunnel. I'm not totally sure what that's about. So like, that's where you get into trouble too, is I'm going to speculate this happened.
Right. On camera. Hey, I don't know what happened back there, but what was going on? Like, can you tell us about it? We're live.
Right.
Like, what?
I think the focus on franchise history was the right decision, because to the point that's been made, like, you don't know when something like this will happen again. We've seen Giannis get close a few times of breaking that record. And we've seen him have the conversations, talking to like Michael Redd and everybody, like, one day I'm going to try to get to it. I'm going to get to it. And he finally did. So like, I think in retrospect, everything looks different. But again, I do think that was the right decision, because that's a moment that is going to be in franchise history forever. Like, his name is on the top of the record book. So directing the questions there, to me, make the most sense.
Yeah, for sure.
We do have a couple of questions sent in from the listeners, curious about Mel in her first year as the sideline and digital reporter for the Bucks. And some questions on that specifically that we do want to get to coming up here after this on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, what are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you're one of those guys that never skips leg day at the gym. Well, your frame of mind should be no different. Maybe your schedule is packed with activities, big work projects that you're tackling, vacations, anything else that can really get to you. It's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when you know what it is that makes you happy, it's hard to find the time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It is designed to be convenient and flexible, and most importantly, it's suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire, and from there you get matched with a licensed therapist. You can even switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. So Mel, to make the transition from the dance team to the in-arena host, but the last step from in-arena host to the sideline and digital reporter for the Bucks, you were traveling with the team all season long. The best spot to be on the road was where?
Oh, I love that question. Okay. For the weather, Miami, for sure. For the weather, Miami. I would say the city that I probably enjoy the most, I like the Bay Area. I do. I'm kind of a hipster at heart. And it's so funny because a lot of people, like when I say that, they're like, of all the California cities, that's the one. I'm like, yeah, I just feel like those are my people, you know? I do. There's just something about the Bay Area that just feels familiar. And I'm born and raised in Milwaukee, so it shouldn't, but it just does. It just feels natural there.
Would you send like weather updates and pictures of you at the pool hanging out in Miami and the West Coast to your friends of, hey, by the way, this is what I'm doing today? Because somebody else in the Bucks travel crew would do that just about every road trip.
Yeah, no, I'm not that rude. Okay. I like actually check the weather in Milwaukee first, and I'm like, today's not a good day.
It snowed today. Better hold on.
Consideration.
You know? Hi.
We did have another question that came in from John. He mentioned that your journey with the Bucks has been extraordinary, to say the least. When you reflect on your path with the Bucks, what is one underrated experience that shaped who you are today?
Oh, wow. That's a really, really, really great. First off, thank you, John, for saying that. That's really sweet. Okay, I'm gonna go with my experience at All-Star, in particular the All-Star game in Chicago 2020, just before COVID happened. This was the All-Star game. I'm sure everyone remembers after Kobe died, and when everything essentially honored him, and it was about that. That was my first time actually being one of the in-arena hosts for the All-Star game. And so for me, it felt like a really big accomplishment career-wise, because I had done the All-Star that year prior in Charlotte. But, you know, I had been at the secondary location, which is still great. To be at All-Star period is a blessing. But I was at the secondary location. I was doing some of the more like the smaller games. And so then the next year to be told, hey, we want you to host the All-Star game, that in and of itself just felt like, wow. And then second, obviously, like just the rule changes and everything. And then I didn't realize, because y'all, I mean, Chicago, it's so close. Like it's one of the big three, right? As far as large cities go here in the US, you forget just how major Chicago is. Yeah. When I say I saw every celebrity you can think of, and then I forgot how many celebrities are from Chicago. So even like seeing all the artists and the music, like just everything that came out of it. And then again, the Kobe of it all. And then that being like right before COVID, and us kind of like hearing whisperings of COVID, but not quite knowing what it was, that shaped me in so many ways. It really did. That experience, having that, seeing everything just drastically change, and like my world changed. Like there was just something about that time that really, it changed me as a person. And I think COVID, obviously I think it changed all of us. I think it's safe to say everyone was changed in some way by COVID. But yeah, definitely that time period, in particular, that All-Star weekend, it really did change me a lot.
How many All-Star games did you do?
I think I did 4. Yeah, I did 4.
It reaches the point of, I don't even remember offhand.
Let me count.
It is just like, not to detour too much, but it is just crazy to think about what we all experienced and what we were used to up until like February of 2020, and how much everything changed after that. Like we talk about it, a few of us on the radio set. I'm pretty certain I got COVID in like March of 2020, February of 2020. But you just didn't really know because that was shortly after the Bucks were in Paris and they came back from that trip.
Oh my
and
gosh.
our travel crew for radio, I didn't go, but one guy came back sick. And shortly afterwards, I had like the worst flu in my life. And now in hindsight, you're like, man, that was probably bad. And how much things have changed since then. One other question, I'm sure this is going to be very, very difficult to answer. When ESPN, and this comes to us from your number one fan, Mark, when ESPN or any other national media outlet eventually offers you a job, will you accept or will you stay with the Bucks?
The answer is both.
The answer is how much are they paying?
I'm gonna be real honest with y'all. I am going to try to be with this team for as long as I possibly can, in whatever capacity that may mean. Because I love this team. I do. I love this team. I love this city. But that being said, I am very honest, very transparent about my goals and aspirations. So Mark, love you. But if you love me too, you'll want to see me grow and prosper. So, I'm going to do whatever, comes my way. And I hope and pray that God blesses me with really great opportunities. But I'm just living in the moment, y'all. It's hard. Like, honestly, like when you two think about it for real, because like this sideline job, it is my dream job. But then it's like, when you reach your dream, okay, what's
your next dream?
What's next?
Yeah. And I feel like you two could be, you could be asked the same thing. And I don't want to say it's your dream job, what you're doing, but I would imagine you love what you do. You're passionate about it. And so it's like, okay, so what's next? Like, I feel like that's
my dream job is the sideline reporter and digital reporter for the Bucks. So when you do get that job from ESPN,
put the good word in for Justin. I got to. That does remind me, I did see on Twitter as well, you're going to be working with the Big Ten Network this upcoming year. So talk about the dreams. Congratulations on that as well. And you mentioned the fact that you're going to try to do things and keep the Bucks. I did see you clearing it up already. Like, I'm still with the Bucks.
There are a few people that responded. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna miss you," and I'm like, "No, you still have me." No, I'm doing all my games are gonna be before the Bucks season. But yeah, I'm really excited. This is gonna be my first like outside of basketball sideline opportunity. So yeah, I'm pumped. Thank you for that.
Well deserved.
More stories from the road. Who was your favorite hang on road trips, and who was the person that you would see? Oh God, Dave again.
Not Dave.
Dave. Oh my gosh. Do people know about Dave here? Because you say
I'm not
that
sure.
You know? I hear you talk about him, but have you explained Dave to
No,
me?
like you just have to experience it.
You do have to experience it. Yeah, Dave's let's just put it this way, Camille. Dave is an extrovert who thinks he's an introvert, okay? And he is the type, we will get on the team bus and this man is having a conversation with every person he walks by. Everyone. Oh, how's your third cousin? And I'm like, how do you know about her third cousin? But I'm serious. I think I heard him ask someone that. I'm not kidding. So yeah, he's a hoot. He's funny. But that being said, the broadcast crew, I spent a lot of time with them on the road, not to sound all like dorky, but we go to dinners and we hang out a lot. I love Marcus and Lisa and Dave, the intro extrovert. They're all just so great. And the Bally's crew, like we really do hang out when we were on the road for playoffs. They're like the only people that I hung out with. Nice. I have a lot of friends, but no, like they're really great. And I think it's really important, by the way, for you to be friends with your teammates, if you will. And so that was part of, I think, the magic that was that championship team. And I think that's a huge part of us having Dame, having these guys here in the off season where they're able to, continue to develop that chemistry that they already started to develop. But now it's like, okay, we can really get into it now that we don't have basketball at the forefront, at least right now.
I'm not even going to lie to you, Mel. I feel like I could talk to you for like the next 5 hours. Like, I feel like we need to be like besties at this point because like the energy has just been great. No, seriously though, like I am so thankful that you chose to come on to Lock On Bucks and spend some time with us. And I hope the fans enjoyed this because I had a really, really good time chatting, getting to like virtually meet you here and just getting to know your story as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you, Camille. And I'm a big fan of yours, so we're best friends already, just so you know.
You can say the same about me too, and your feelings about my work. Last thing to slip in, like keeping an actual question out there. who was so doing all the halftime interviews and everything you would do pregame and pieces you'd put together, who was the guy that you enjoyed, or girl with Sydney, enjoyed talking to the most?
Ooh, great question. I actually would go ahead and say Dame. Dame, I want to tell y'all real quick, he immediately gave me, did we go to high school together? Like, are you in my family? Like, are we friends? Have we been neighbors before? He's everyone's friend. In his goodbye post to Portland, he named ushers. I mean, he named the milkman. He named so many different people, but that is truly who Damian Lillard is. And I cannot tell you how many times, especially on the road, the production crew, because every arena has their own different crew, they would say to me like, wow, Damian Lillard gave a really great response. You really know how to get good answers. I'm like, that's him. Camille, you said you could talk to me for hours. I could talk to him for hours. Dame is awesome. He's very personable and down to earth. And I just appreciate that he understands that everyone has a role and everyone's role is very important. He gets it. You know what I mean? And so when he's with me and we're having those conversations, he gets it. He's like, you want to get a good nugget from me. You want a good soundbite. The fans want to hear, about my thoughts on this, but also I want to give you something really good to grasp from that. And I just really appreciate that he has that mentality. He's never said that to me, but I can tell he does in his actions. And, and again, in that goodbye post to Portland, to me, that really spoke volumes. And then being able to witness him as a person, I'm like, oh, you really are that. And even more than people realize. So yeah, he's great.
The goodbye post to Portland, the fact that to this day you'll see on social media people in Portland like, I just ran into Damian Lillard at Costco. Like, holy cow. Yeah. I assumed that was going to be your answer because I've heard the same from a few people. So to bring up his name again, Dave, same thing of like, yeah, I mean, it feels like, and granted, he's oblivious to how people actually feel about him. But Dave had told me early on, it feels like I've known him forever. And we talked one day after practice for like an hour, just talking about him being uprooted, coming from Portland, being there without his family. Dave, as everybody knows, was calling games in Virginia. His wife still lives in Virginia. So he comes to Milwaukee, goes back to Virginia in the offseason. They bonded over that and built this relationship that everybody you talk to that interacts with Damian Lillard says the same thing of like, he is the most, and we hear it with Giannis and Chris and everybody else, but to see somebody that hasn't been in your atmosphere per se come in and give that same vibe of he's the most unassuming superstar there is.
And how great is it, by the way, that the Bucks front office recognizes that? Because I think they're really great at bringing those type of high character guys to this organization. So yeah, kudos to them seriously for that.
Yeah, chemistry is important.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we didn't ask you your thoughts on the moves or prediction. I would assume your prediction is
10 out of 10. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, 10 out of 10, 98 no, 82 wins and 16 in the playoffs.
Yep, naturally.
And your second championship.
That's right. There you go, Justin. I mean, come on. Look at that. You know what? I was thinking of hiring an assistant, but I feel like Justin could just be my spokesperson. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just going back to the start of this. But no, I really do. I think that the offseason moves were great. I loved the way that you two put it. And I love the way that you broke it down, in terms as far as what we had available to us, what our options were. Yeah. And I really appreciated you comparing them to the pieces that, we lost and whom you assume they're going to replace and, what numbers are going to be, who's going to be starting, et cetera. I really appreciated you breaking everything down. But genuinely, I agreed wholeheartedly with what you were saying. I think John Horst made incredible moves. I think that we got stronger, we got faster, we got younger. I think we did all of the things that we needed to do. And now we just got to, put that on the court. Everything looks great on paper, but all teams look great on paper, so now we got to put that into action and get that chemistry going.
Yeah, we don't want to be champions of the offseason. We want to be champions at the end of the season. So hopefully all of the things that we saw pan out, the chemistry is built, that pick and roll duo between Giannis and Dame takes off, that third man action involving Chris Middleton takes off. There's a whole bunch of things to be excited for. But again, it's on paper right now. But as soon as that season starts, it begins. And I am so excited for this next season of Bucks basketball to start back up.
Me too.
Well, Mel, as we learned, a couple of weeks ago, we're neighbors, so I'm sure I'll bump into you again sometime this offseason and see you around the arena. I know this was a pretty highly anticipated appearance by a lot of Locked On fans, and I think just your story, that you saw the reaction of Bucks fans last year, that I think part of it We know Zora's great. Katie George was great. Everybody the Bucks have had in those roles have been great. But I think just your journey with the team, your Wisconsin roots, everything you did in the organization along the way, you give off this vibe that you're the neighbor and you're somebody that every Bucks fan knows. And, like the Damian Lillard analogy, I think I went to high school with Mel. I think I know Mel. So I think that is a lot of the support that you see and why it seemed like everybody had that same assumption last year. I'm assuming it's Mel that's going to be the new sideline reporter.
No, thank you for saying that. I have been told my entire life that I make people feel better, that I can make people feel very comfortable and that I can change the energy in a room. But I'll tell y'all, for as great as that is, that can also be negative, because when you're somebody who is expected to be that positive beacon, if you will, be that person who's always uplifting others. And, it's a heavy, I don't want to call it burden, but I'm going to use that phrase. It's a heavy burden to bear. However, I think when you start to lean into wait, but there's a reason why I was built this way. There's a reason why God or the universe, whatever you believe in, designed me this way. That's when you really start to live in that and you become even better for it. So thank you for saying that, Justin. I appreciate that. And it definitely reaffirms that I'm doing the right thing. So I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. So thank you, Mel. Appreciate it.
Thank you both. Thank you for having me. And you both are killing it. Keep killing it.
Thank you.
All right, that will do it for today's show. For Camille, for Melanie Ricks as well, keeping her way beyond the time that we had mentioned it would be. I'm Justin. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.